So, fun fact, in today's Haaretz weekend edition, around 100,000 people all over Israel have the opportunity to read a 3,000-word Hebrew language magazine feature about CBST. Kind of tried to print it out here in a kind of little pieced together way, but that is actually, my friend just sent that to me from the north in the weekend supplement, and I have some people gathering some copies for us to have the ready version. But if you want to explore it, and there's a copy right here. You can stop sharing, but look at our beautiful chorus smeared above and below. Asaf Ostrinsky, our finance director, and I were reading the article as it came out the other night. Asaf is a native Hebrew speaker, and we spent a while, it is 3,000 words long, enjoying the essay. And I think it's reasonable to say that it's not 100% factual. You know, it seems like the tone is largely kind of by and for secular Israelis who have a certain amount of knowledge of Judaism and a certain amount of knowledge of the diaspora and a certain amount of knowledge of LGBTQ people, but also maybe who are lacking a little bit in terminology and this sort of thing. But I think on the whole, it's really a beautiful, beautiful piece that Meirav Moran, the reporter who visited with us a few times, and some of you have met these past few weeks, really beautiful piece that she wrote that highlights a lot of our history, our community, our influence, and our vision. And of course, one of the laughs that we had around the office this week as a result of this piece is that when the media does a piece about you, and you kind of see the things that don't seem quite right about you, which is kind of standard, right, for the media, you are reminded to be careful about how you consume information about other people, right? We have to be careful about believing every and any word, no matter where we consume it. Today, we are 4 weeks into the Torah reading cycle, and there is so much to appreciate about the power of words. We began, of course, with our creation story in 7 days, in which the universe is fashioned with words. Let there be light, and there was light. We continued 10 generations later. Rabbi Klein was here 2 weeks ago and taught us about Noach, who was righteous in his generation. 10 generations after Noach, Rabbi Werber spoke last week about Avraham's origin story and played with the Midrashim on Or Kasdim, where Avraham was born. Not so much as a place, but Or Kasdim as an experience. The progenitor of monotheism, per these Midrashim, was saved from a fire, and enduring this experience taught us all about the risks of turning up the heat. The New York City mayoral election has come and gone. I still do not think it's appropriate in my role to publicly endorse any candidate in a year of the election season before Election Day. So similarly, the other night when I walked into the celebration for Mayor-elect Mamdani some half hour after he was elected, it was announced, I was trying, mostly successfully, to avoid the press. But on the way out, there was this reporter from the Religion News Service who recognized me. And I had one of these moments where I thought, oh my gosh, if I don't answer the question, it's going to turn into, Rabbi Jason Klein had no comment or whatever. So I was like, I should say something, right? And so, what did I say? I said something about possibility, opportunity, understanding, coming together. And I suppose I had just been biased because I just spent an hour or two in this experience where there were hundreds of New Yorkers of all sorts of backgrounds and experiences coming together who seemed to really be feeling something hopeful and different and unique with this particular victory. I know CBST has its own political diversity, and yet within that diversity, there is a lot of consensus that there is much that is broken in the American political system, in world politics, that we are living in an age of tyranny, and that a lot of this we here feel, as the kids say, extra. Extra because we are a community of Jews and our loved ones. We are a community connected to the land of Israel. We are a community that is socioeconomically diverse. We are a community that centers queer and trans people. We are a community that lifts up immigrants. We describe the various antidotes for despair that our clergy have taught over the years. Not just hope, but possibility and possibilities, cultivating joy, and developing a sense that each of us can and should do something. This week we mark the November pogroms, Kristallnacht, not simply mourning, but by teaching and singing about German and Austrian music that could have been entirely lost. We're not just saying never again with our words, but we're reinforcing it by lifting up the lives, the learning, the arts, the teaching of those who might have otherwise not been remembered. And we Jews often say never again when we are fighting anti-Jewish hatred. And we also sometimes need to remind ourselves that never again means never again for anyone and everyone. This week's Parshat has an important never again moment. In the story of the Akedah, the near sacrifice of Isaac by his father Abraham, barely 12 verses long, the story is, from the first command to go offer his son on a mountaintop until, mercifully, Abraham is interrupted. Over the years, when I've had the opportunity to chant these verses, I've often asked myself, whether it's this Shabbat or on Rosh Hashanah, where we also customarily chant the story, I've often asked myself, how do I do this? Something unique is going on here. Is this one of those things where you lower your voice because the story is so heart-wrenching and disturbing? Is this the kind of thing where you slow down to make sure that the kahal understands the gravity of this word by word by word? Or is this the kind of thing where you speed up from the moment Isaac is bound on the altar until Abraham is interrupted? Because in that liminal space, that is the liminal space that we don't actually pause and embrace, but the kind of liminal space that we actually try to extricate ourselves from as quickly as possible. It has been noted that the Hebrew word vayakod, and Abraham bound his son on the altar, that the word vayakod is used exactly once in all 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, in the entire Tanakh. In the ancient world, when literal child sacrifice was a given in many tribes, our tradition walked right up to the possibility that faith could manifest so zealously that a parent could consider murdering their child. And in the 12th verse of the story, an angel says Avraham. Avraham interrupts Avraham not just once, but twice. And even though we refer to this story kind of casually in our learning as the Akedah, the verb is never used again in the entire Bible. Last week, Rabbi Werber spoke about the danger of becoming fire worshipers, of a style of rhetoric and communication that the only way to communicate is by being the loudest and the most inflammatory. Some of the responses to Zoran Mamdani's election as our mayor by legacy Jewish organizations who have historically been associated with defending Jews from others who seek to do us harm, some of those responses seem to have missed the memo that Rabbi Werber sent to the world in her Drashah last Friday night. The memo that we should not be worshiping fire. To be clear, I'm not saying that people can't have legitimate concerns about what is next for New York City, but to use the language of self-importance of Jewish New Yorkers or to engage special tracking and monitoring of our mayor sounds a lot to me like it is perpetuating anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish conspiracies and power, than it actually is about building a thoughtful coalition in which all of us hold one another accountable. We never hear a reuse of the specific verb to bind that Avraham uses with his son in Parshat Vayera. We do, however, find that at the story's opening, God asks Avraham to take his son, and God reveals the news gradually, one word after the other. Kach et bincha, et ichidecha, asher ahavta, et Yitzchak, the Midrash. Take your son. But I have two sons. The one whom your only son. But each of my sons is the only son of his mother, the one whom you love. Come on, I love both of my sons. Isaac. Oh. Maybe this is, as Rashi quotes from the Midrash, to reveal the news gradually and intentionally. Or maybe, if you will, it is to turn up the heat. But perhaps equally important is what is not said. The very last thing that God ever says in the text of the Torah to Avraham is this line: take your son to sacrifice him. There is never a direct interaction between God and Avraham on the way to Mount Moriah. There is never a direct interaction on the way up to the top of the mountain, never a direct interaction on the top of the mountain at the altar or after this takes place. In fact, the Torah is specific when Avraham is interrupted. It is not Adonai, it is Malach Adonai, a messenger of God, an angel of God. Somehow it is not God, God's self, who is interrupting the father of our people while he is wielding the knife. And the very last interaction between Avraham and Yitzchak is when Yitzchak asks, where is the lamb for the sacrifice? Rashi again, they each walked together. The two of them walked together in this silent readiness for what was about to happen. The consequences of the heat being turned up so high are the risks of burning bridges, stopping communications, ending relationships that should have been so obvious, but are now only left for the Midrash to imagine. Educators tell us that it is better to teach children by showing them what to do rather than showing them what not to do. But this story reminds us year after year on New Year's Day, and once again in this season, about the using and the reusing of words, about understandings and misunderstandings and silence, and that sometimes when we have walked so close to the altar, so close to the fire, we must learn to never, ever, ever do so again. My wish for the Jewish community and for all New Yorkers this week is an extension of Rabbi Werber's reminder to us last week not to worship the fire, and also to learn from our tradition that there is a time to speak up, and there are also times when silence is praise, when we should be in the mode of really listening. That we should be skeptical at best when someone too zealously puts our future on an altar. We have opportunities to return to cooler heads, to more listening and less shouting, to fewer assumptions and more curiosity. Let us 2 million plus New Yorkers who voted and all of those we interact with build a collective news story. Shabbat Shalom.